Thank you. Good morning. My name is Kristijan Lenković. So today we'll be talking about the Node.js and how to run those applications, mainly web applications in AWS platform. So first of all, let's continue with what is Node.js. So Node.js is now online for 9 years. And there was a lot of fuss with it when it started, when it came to the public. And the main idea of the Node.js is basically to replace or extend the functionalities of browser JavaScript execution. So not only that with Node.js platform, which is of course open source cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment, you can now run that exactly the same environment running V8 engine outside the web browser, which is Node.js V8 engine. So what is it used for? So JavaScript, the main functionality was in the last 20 years basically just code that can be executed on the browsers, web browsers. And now you can do the same thing outside the browsers, and you can use the same language for running front-end and both client-side and server-side scripting. So basically JavaScript is everywhere. So you can basically use the single language to control or code multiple front-end, back-end applications and or other kinds of applications. And the cool thing is basically that it gives you the ability to use the latest syntax and semantics that was created just a couple of years ago. And each year there is a new version of JavaScript coming around February. And Node.js is keeping it always is up to date with the language and is all the time implemented in Node.js. And Node.js has become a really good replacement for previous technologies such as PHP or .NET, although they are still used today. But you don't have to learn other programming languages. You don't have to learn other frameworks. You simply just continue working on JavaScript as you did before when you were programming web browser applications. And it's used by big players like GoDaddy, Groupon, IBM, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Netflix, PayPal, SAP, and so on. So let's now continue with the AWS. How can you run Node.js applications in AWS platform? Basically, there are multiple ways of doing it. You can simply run it as in an EC2 instance. You basically create it, you install the Node.js environment there, and you simply deploy your application there and run it. This is the simple solution to do it. For more advanced environments, or the idea is to basically create a Docker image. And that Docker image is stored in ECR, so Elastic Container Registry of Amazon. And you can simply run it, well, simply. You definitely have to have a dedicated DevOps to do that, of course, in an Elastic Container Service. So this is advanced. So these are the advanced services that you can use in order to run Node.js, and you have to have a Docker container to run it there. The simplest solution, of course, is AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which we will talk about today in detail. And the other one is AWS Lambda, which is serverless function execution, basically on-demand function execution, and you can run your functions in Node.js or JavaScript. So, about Elastic Beanstalk. The idea is to minimize the work required for deploying your applications and running them and maintaining your applications. So this service is basically just a wrapper in AWS, which is highly integrated with EC2 instances, S3 buckets, and all other services, including RDS for databases, which you can use and minimize or reduce management complexity of your application. Along Node.js, you can use Java, .NET, PHP, Python, Ruby, Go, and other Docker environments in Elastic Beanstalk. And when you create your application in Elastic Beanstalk, you can choose between multiple web servers which most important here are Nginx and Apache. So, what are the features of Elastic Beanstalk? It's pre-configured infrastructure. So you don't have to care about running instances, deploying your environment there, making sure that the code is deployed, seeing what's, checking out the metrics like you used to do in EC2 instances while doing it in your command line interface in terminal. So everything is prepared for you. You just have to upload your code there, press run or deploy, and that's it. So you can choose between single instance or multiple instances when you create your Elastic Beanstalk app. So if you choose a single instance, all the traffic to your backend application or your web application is directly routed to the instance itself, which has pre-installed Nginx or Apache web server. Or you can choose to have multiple instances, which enables you load balancing, auto scaling, etc., which basically proxies all your traffic to those instances behind load balancer. And there are two tiers of applications. Basically, you can create your web server, or you can create a worker which runs in the background and you don't have access to it directly. And it's highly integrated with AWS RDS and S3 bucket. So you can choose when you create your environment there to connect it with RDS, so it's automatically available there for each of your environments. And all your code that you actually upload and deploy there is stored in S3 bucket. Really nice to have feature is that it provides you a unique domain name so you can access your application. So you don't have to worry about Route 56, at least just for accessing your backend application. So this is how it goes. You create an application on Elastic Beanstalk. You upload your zip file, so your source code is stored in the zip files. You set the version tag or whatever you want to set there. We'll go through that later. You launch the environment, and all you have to do is just take care and manage to see if everything is all right, if there is some kind of a bottleneck, or etc. So I'll now present you with a demo, although I won't connect directly to AWS console. I have some prepared screenshots for this because, well, I don't want to mess up with demo gods right now, so let's just go through the screenshots. So basically, when you open your console and open the Elastic Beanstalk, you're presented with this screen. You just simply type the name of your application, description, and click Create. What it does now, it creates, let's call it a container, where you can actually manage all your environments. What is an environment? Environment is actually an EC2 instance that is running behind. So you have environments, you have application versions, and you have saved configurations. About environments, if I click on Create New One, I'm presented with this screen, which basically gives me a prompt to select what tier of environment I want to choose. So it can be a web server, or it can be a web worker environment. I chose web server, of course. And here, I'm presented with another inputs that I have to edit. And the important thing is this environment name and domain. So you choose your environment name. For instance, it could be, I don't know, application-production or development environment or staging, whatever. And for each of your environments, you get the domain set for you. And you can choose your platform on which you want to run your application. In this case, it can be Node.js or it can be any other, like Python or .NET or whatever. And from there, you can just upload your app by pressing the button there on the bottom. You're presented with this screen, and you basically upload your zip file and click Upload, and it will actually start deploying itself. It takes usually about 3 to 5 minutes to set everything up. So, if everything went well in your console, you're presented with this screen, and it says everything is fine, health is okay, the application is running. Unfortunately, is not easy to see on this slide, but there is a link, actual URL, which you can click on and access your application. And if you do, and if you run sample application that is provided by AWS, you're presented with this screen. The name of application was, in this case, travel request. So, about the console, you have a lot of things you can configure there. So, you choose a software. We chose it before. It's Node.js, so that platform you can choose a version of Node.js you want. You also have instances, so you can choose what type of instance will be running your code. It can be a whatever tier of instances that is available for EC2, of course. And the third thing is capacity. About capacity, you have the ability to choose between, as I said before, single instance or multiple instances. So if you choose multiple instances, you are basically prompted with another with few parameters that you can edit for what is the minimum amount required of instances running, or maximum, or other stuff that is in relation with the multiple instance environments. And when you choose the multiple instance environments, you are presented with, so you can edit the load balancer configurations, which basically is yet another AWS service which is highly integrated with Elastic Beanstalk. And you can always update or make your instance running your up-to-date code, or you can roll back to previous versions just directly from this screen. So if something goes wrong, you can always, with a simple few clicks, return back to the original version that was actually working. About the security, so pretty simple. So as it is for EC2 instances, you just assign security groups, and there might be some multiple services or multiple accounts that have access to this service to maintain it. So all stuff with port forwarding, etc., is managed right strictly from here. And you have the ability to monitor your application to see what is the CPU usage, what is the RAM usage, what is the hard disk usage or SSD, usage, and so on. Another thing is the notifications. So you can have alerts and other types of notifications that will trigger when some metric, for instance, goes around. So, for instance, we have CPU around more than 90% of usage utility. And in that case, you can be automatically alerted, okay, something's going on, you have to check. About the network, if you have virtual private cloud service available, you can put your Elastic Beanstalk or your EC2 instances in a private network environment. And of course, you have the ability to choose to connect it with your database, with your RDS service. RDS service as is, you can set it up here, but it's recommended that you create your own RDS service for production environments. And if you are creating your development environments, testing environments, or whatever environments you like, you can do it directly from here. So inside the Elastic Beanstalk. Because when you delete your Elastic Beanstalk application, all the databases will be deleted as well that are linked. But if you delete it accidentally for the production, it should stay there because it's a separate instance running. So I can modify some of the configuration. You can see here, so this is an advanced configuration for Elastic Beanstalk. So I'm modifying currently the software. I can choose a proxy server, so Nginx or Apache or whatever. You choose the Node version. You can enable zip compression and so on. The important thing is Node command, because some of you know that there is an npm package. Basically, there's a simple command npm start that basically starts boots your application. And by default, Elastic Beanstalk with Node.js environment will try to run npm start. If there is no script set for npm start, or if you want to override, you can basically put it there, and it will, when the instance runs, you can set it up from here, or you can set up your running command here. Also, as well, you can store all your logs that you have or that your application is generating directly in S3 bucket. Important thing here is that you can also set your environment variables. So for instance, if I want to connect to my production RDS, or if I'm using some other service that requires password or something else which is not supposed to be used by all developers or whoever develops the application, you can set it up there. Just make sure you're using environment variables in your Node.js properly. So this is a basic explanation, or let's say demo tutorial, how to create your app. And this is it. So just upload your code, press deploy, and it's there. And now I'd like to discuss about some tips and tricks that you might use, or you may encounter some problems as we did, so maybe I can help you with those and just put you in a proper direction to solve them. So native binaries. Node.js, along the npm packages or modules, let's say, which are written in JavaScript, also supports the execution of native binary packages, which are created by with C++ or C or Rust or whatever language. The problem is, when you run your development environment, when you set it on your instance, it can be an EC2 instance or it can be with the created with Elastic Beanstalk, you have to have the compiler for C or C++. So you can compile the packages, the dependencies, and you can run them. And this is a bit tricky. So in order to use it, you're forced to create a specific file called .npmrc, set up the unsafe permissions to true, and basically it will force the Node compiler to actually run as root, so it can compile your dependencies properly. One of those examples is actually bcrypt. So it's a library written in C, C++, that actually enables you to hash properly. There are some implementations of bcrypt.js, but they're implemented in JavaScript, so it takes time to execute that code. So you should be always using native libraries. And this is a way how to enable compiling. Another thing is WebSockets. So WebSockets are not actually available out of the box, so when you click deploy application. But it can be enabled. In your source folder, you have to create a specific folder called .eb extension. And in there, you can put your configuration files for your instance. In those configuration files, you can configure any application or service that might run your Node.js app. So you can configure your Nginx, for instance, which if you want to use WebSockets, you have to configure it your way. So you have to proxy all the WebSockets connection directly to your application. And when you create an application with Elastic Beanstalk, it automatically comes with default configuration for either your Nginx or Apache web server. And here you have the ability to actually create your own Nginx or Apache configuration file, which you can put directly in your source file. And when you upload your code, when it gets deployed, Elastic Beanstalk will actually go through it, find that file, and reconfigure your Nginx or Apache web server for you. So you have the ability to directly configure your web server, which is a big thing. And by doing this, you can enable WebSockets. Another thing to note here is WebSocket Secure, so Secure Protocol, SSL. The thing is, if you run single instance, it's up to you to handle SSL, HTTPS and WebSocket Secure, because you have to create your own certificate and put it there. Your own private key has to be put in that configuration that I was previously talking about in EB extensions. So that might be tricky. You may use Let's Encrypt. So for instance, in your Elastic Beanstalk, you can create your own application that will actually, you can use certbot for Let's Encrypt, and which will automatically create your certificate and put it there. But if you use load balancer or multiple instances of your application, you can easily use the AWS certificate manager and create your certificate and put it on your load balancer. So there shouldn't be any configuration for it. So this is a big thing you have to keep in mind. Another thing is, which I already told you about, you have to have the dedicated RDS instance for your production environments. So do not use the ability in AWS there for your production. And moreover, I showed in this presentation the AWS console with the user interface. You can click and you can edit the configuration for your Elastic Beanstalk. But I suggest that you use and utilize the Elastic Beanstalk CLI. It is extremely useful. It has even more features than you can see on the user interface there. And more importantly, you have the ability to create your own continuous integration and delivery scripts by using Elastic Beanstalk CLI. So you can, if you're using AWS code commit or pipelines by AWS, you will definitely be using this tool, which will automatically upload your code, use your environment variables, and deploy it there, tag it, and release it. So I highly advise you to use or start using EB CLI if you didn't already. So these are more technical. And you should always tag your application environments, especially if you have multiple environments that are running and multiple instances, multiple services. In any case, whichever AWS service you are using, you should always tag your instances. It's much easier to maintain, manage, and go through all the logs of those instances, all those services you are running. You should always load test your app. In order to do so, if you have multiple instances, you can set minimum and maximum auto-scaling to 1, so for your environment, and basically you have the ability to in detail see what is actually going on your instance, where the bottlenecks are, and you can maybe resolve how to deal with your bottlenecks with some kind of optimization. And the important thing is, so although you have your app running and it is scaled for your needs to serve the backend in this instance, you should always take care of your database. Because if you have 200 or 300 instances that are running there and they are connected to a single database, which could be a PostgreSQL or MySQL, well, you have a problem. So this is not taken care by Elastic Beanstalk, but RDS has his own mechanisms to solve this thing. But just one thing to keep in mind. And there are multiple ways how you can do deployments. So for instance, there is blue-green. Blue-green type of deployment is if you want to update new version of your application, Node.js or any kind of application, you basically create another environment. And when the environment is set up, it takes about 5 to 6, 7 minutes. You just change DNS, so switch it there to your new environment, which is called green. In that case, it's up to DNS to sync all over the world in order to render or to connect your domain with your app. Another way is to deploy it in place, which basically means that you replace it in your environment that is running. Elastic Beanstalk actually has a mechanism, so you are running a single instance, but in the background it runs 2 application instances. And when you try with the in-place deployment, it basically tries to run your newer version, and if it's run correctly, if there are no errors, it will automatically switch directly in that instance. But those deployments take more time. And of course, always keep in mind to check your metrics. You can do all sorts of configurations with your metrics and alarms, and basically all this Elastic Beanstalk provides for you is easier maintenance of your Node.js application. So you can ignore PM2, which you used before. You can ignore all other services or tools that you've used before, because Elastic Beanstalk does it for you. And it's, let's say, a medium tier. If you want to use some specific application, small application, you can run it on your EC2 instance or even Lambda functions. If you want to grow, if you want to have everything Dockerized or containerized, virtualized, then you can use Docker and you can use RDS and, not RDS, excuse me, the Elastic Container Service and Registry. But this is a sweet spot. So it can run simple applications, it can run extreme applications such as big enterprise applications. And that's all I have. So thank you for your attention, and we can continue with questions if you have them.
Do we have access to the EC2 instances that Elastic Beanstalk provides?
Yes. Yes, you have Elastic Beanstalk access to them because okay, you can do it in an old fashion, just you get the key for it and log in there. But this Elastic Beanstalk CLI tool that I discussed before has a sub-option SSH. So you can SSH directly from there. It will automatically set up your keys for it. You just initialize the Elastic Beanstalk CLI in your application, in the root of your application, set up SSH, and it will do everything for you by using the application access ID and your secret code that you have. So yeah, it is possible.
Is there support for some kind of service discovery? For example, you have many applications, for example, database. Can you inject or pull information about the database that you're going to use and inject it for some environment variable or some kind of external service to the application?
So, if I understand correctly, you want to see which instances are running or which environments are running.
For example, we have, I don't know, many databases, and
Okay.
you want to hardcode database in configuration, you want to discover automatically configuration once one is on that point.
Uh-huh.
Do we have, does it support that?
So,
Either for environment variable or something else?
yes, so the idea is not to hardcode any of your connection strings to your databases. The idea is to put in environment variables. And you have the ability to do it there, or you can do it directly from the Elastic Beanstalk CLI, or there is another option, which is basically to put your configuration in .eb extensions folder, so you can configure it directly from there. So you should be doing this, yes. Okay.
When you create like many instances for Elastic Beanstalk, I think it doesn't work. Does it create like a cluster, or are all those instances separated? They don't have anything that connects them.
Yeah, so for each instance is basic. So if you have multiple instances, you have multiple EC2 instances, but you can configure it with the CloudFormation. So you have the ability to use other AWS services which are available for this kind of usage. So yeah, you have separate instances, and each instance can be accessed directly. Okay. Which is extremely important for your logs, for monitoring and alerting. Okay. Looks like that's it. Okay, thank you very much.